The unexpected arrival. The landing that shook the galaxy. The Zentari diplomatic station had been built to withstand meteor strikes, solar flares, and the occasional territorial dispute between member species. What it hadn't been designed for was humanity's idea of a gentle landing. Lieutenant Jade Brooks wiped sweat from her forehead as she guided the Earth vessel Determination toward the docking bay. "Control, this is Earth Ship 1 requesting permission to land. We're coming in nice and easy." General Marcus Stone stood behind her, arms crossed, watching the viewscreen with the calm expression of a man who'd survived 3 tours on Luna and considered vacuum exposure a minor inconvenience. "Nice work, Brooks." "Barely felt that one." What the humans considered barely felt registered on the station's sensors as a small earthquake. In the diplomatic quarters, Ambassador Quillnex, a being that resembled a walking crystal formation, watched his carefully arranged mineral collection scatter across the floor as the entire station shuddered. "By the 7 moons of Zentera," Quillnex whispered, his crystalline body chiming like wind chimes in a hurricane. "What manner of vessel approaches with such enthusiasm? First impressions are everything." High Counselor Vortax scuttled across the observation deck on 6 insectoid legs, compound eyes fixed on the human ship. As a member of the Krillian species, he'd seen combat vessels, cargo haulers, and luxury cruisers. But never had he witnessed a spacecraft that looked like it had been built by someone who considered aesthetic appeal to be a 4-letter word. The human ship was all angles and brutal efficiency. Scorch marks covered its hull like battle scars, and what appeared to be actual welding repairs were visible from the outside. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed proud of this. "Counselor," chirped his aide, a nervous junior diplomat whose antennae twitched with anxiety. "The humans are requesting permission to disembark. They say they're ready to party." Vortax's mandibles clicked together in what humans would have mistaken for applause but was actually a sign of deep concern among his people. Ready to party? What does this phrase mean in their cultural context? Before anyone could answer, the airlock hissed open. The humans emerge. General Stone stepped onto the station with the confident stride of a man who owned whatever ground his boots touched. Behind him, Lieutenant Brooks carried what appeared to be a small arsenal of equipment that the alien scanners couldn't quite classify as either scientific instruments or weapons. The distinction, they were beginning to realize, might not matter to humans. "Greetings, fellow sentients." Stone's voice boomed across the reception area, causing several smaller species to take involuntary steps backward. "I'm General Marcus Stone, representing the United Earth government. We're honored to be here." Ambassador Quillnex approached cautiously, his crystal formation catching and refracting the station's lights in beautiful patterns. "Welcome, General Stone. I am Ambassador Quillnex of the Zentari Collective. We are pleased to finally meet you in person." Stone extended his hand in what humans considered a friendly gesture. Quillnex, having been briefed on human customs, reached out with a delicate crystal appendage. The handshake that followed would be remembered in diplomatic circles for decades. When gentle becomes terrifying. To General Stone, it was barely a firm grip, the kind you'd give your grandmother at Sunday dinner. To Ambassador Quillnex, it felt like being caught in a mining drill. Hairline fractures spread across the ambassador's appendage as Stone pumped his hand enthusiastically. "Great to meet you. You folks have built quite a station here. Very impressive architecture. Reminds me of the bunker complexes we used to build on Mars." "Mars?" Quillnex managed to say, trying not to let the pain show in his harmonic voice. You built structures on Mars?" "Oh sure," Brooks chimed in cheerfully, completely oblivious to the horrified stares from nearby delegates. "Mars was a great training ground. Really prepared us for the lunar colonies. Nothing like a good dust storm and sub-zero temperatures to keep you sharp, you know." High Counselor Vortax's compound eyes tracked every movement as more humans emerged from their ship. Each one moved with a predatory grace that made his evolutionary instincts scream warnings. These weren't diplomats, they were apex predators wearing diplomatic badges. The realization dawns. As the human delegation spread out across the reception area, a pattern became clear to the assembled aliens. These beings didn't just live on a hostile world, they thrived on it. Every casual mention of their home planet painted a picture of a nightmare realm where survival itself was considered a casual hobby. So anyway, General Stone continued, his hand still gripping Quilnex's increasingly fragile appendage, we brought some gifts from Earth. Nothing fancy, just some local delicacies and a few examples of our recreational equipment. The way he said recreational equipment made every alien in earshot suddenly very interested in being somewhere else. Ambassador Quilnex finally managed to extract his appendage from the general's grip, tiny crystal fragments falling to the floor like frozen tears. Recreational equipment? You bet. Lieutenant Brooks hefted what looked like a metallic club covered in mysterious markings. This is a baseball bat. It's for a game we play with a hard ball traveling at about 90 miles per hour. Great stress relief after a long day. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for natural disasters or declarations of war. High Counselor Vorthak realized with growing horror that the humans weren't trying to intimidate anyone. This was them being friendly. Cultural misunderstandings. The translation terror. Dr. Felix Grant adjusted his translator device and smiled warmly at the assembled alien delegates. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, he'd spent years preparing for this moment. What he hadn't prepared for was how his enthusiasm would be received. Fellow beings, he began, his voice carrying across the cultural exchange hall, we're thrilled to participate in your traditional greeting ceremonies. We've studied your customs extensively. Diplomat Zirian, whose aquatic nebulan physiology required a specialized mobility suit filled with breathing fluid, bubbled nervously. Through the suit's speaker, his translated voice carried an unmistakable tremor. We appreciate your interest, Dr. Grant. Perhaps we should start with something simple? Captain Tara Mitchell stepped forward, her military bearing making several smaller species instinctively huddle together. We brought our own traditional items too. This is called a stress ball. She squeezed what appeared to be a small rubber sphere, which compressed under pressure that would have been sufficient to crack most alien exoskeletons. How much stress does it require? Whispered Minister Thylos, the ethereal gas-based voidkin whose translucent form flickered with anxiety patterns. Oh, hardly any, Mitchell replied cheerfully. Just whatever you've got built up from daily life. You know, traffic jams, work deadlines, asteroid mining accidents, that sort of thing. The greeting catastrophe. The Zentari had prepared their traditional harmony ceremony, a delicate resonance between crystal beings that created beautiful musical patterns. Ambassador Quilnex, still nursing his fractured appendage from the earlier handshake, approached Dr. Grant with visible reluctance. Dr. Grant, in our ceremony, we create shared vibrations through gentle contact. The frequencies must be precisely calibrated to avoid damage. Sounds wonderful. Grant said, clapping his hands together with enough force to make nearby aliens flinch. We humans are great with rhythm. Lieutenant Brooks here used to be in a heavy metal band. Lieutenant Brooks grinned and pulled out what looked like metallic sticks. Drumsticks. I brought them in case we needed to jam together. The Zentari's harmonic frequencies immediately became discordant with terror. In their species' history, the only things that made sounds like drumsticks were predators breaking through their crystal caves. Perhaps, Quilnex suggested with the careful tone of someone defusing a bomb, we could try the Krillian harmony dance instead? When dancing becomes dangerous. High Counselor Vorthak had specifically requested the traditional Krillian spiral dance, believing it would be safe for humans to participate in. His species performed intricate movements that represented the flow of cosmic energy, delicate, precise, and utterly incompatible with human physiology. Captain Mitchell watched the demonstration with the focused attention of someone analyzing a combat technique. I think I've got it, she announced, then proceeded to perform what looked like a martial arts kata crossed with interpretive dance. The result was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Where the Krillians moved like gentle breezes, Mitchell moved like a controlled tornado. Her version of the spiral dance involved sweeping arm movements that could have knocked out a small aircraft and footwork that made the station's floor plates rattle. Fascinating, Dr. Grant observed, taking notes. Your species has developed a kinetic expression that mirrors our military close-quarters combat training. The similarities to human martial arts are remarkable. Minister Thylos's gaseous form began to swirl in distress patterns. Martial arts? You have formalized combat into artistic expression? Oh sure, Brooks said casually. We've got dozens of fighting styles. Karate, kung fu, boxing, mixed martial arts, extreme wrestling, that's the fun one where you fight in dangerous environments just to make it more interesting. The cultural exchange revelation. Diplomat Zirian attempted to salvage the situation by introducing the Nebulan meditation technique, a peaceful practice involving synchronized breathing and mental harmony. This is our most calming tradition, he gurgled through his suit speakers. We empty our minds of all aggressive thoughts. Dr. Grant nodded enthusiastically. We have something similar called yoga. Though our version involves holding your body in positions that would normally cause significant pain until you achieve mental clarity through physical endurance. Physical endurance? Zirian's breathing fluid became cloudy with confusion. It's great, Captain Mitchell added. I can hold a warrior pose for 20 minutes while balancing on one leg. Really gets the blood flowing after you've been sitting in a combat cockpit all day. The aliens exchanged glances that needed no translation. Every attempt at peaceful cultural exchange was revealing new depths of human insanity. Minister Thylos gathered courage from his ethereal state to ask the question they were all thinking. Dr. Grant, these activities you describe as recreational, they all seem to involve deliberate discomfort or danger. Is this normal for your species? Normal? Grant looked puzzled. Well, I suppose it depends on your definition. We do them for fun, if that's what you mean. Humans generally need some level of challenge to feel engaged. Otherwise, we get bored. And when humans get bored? Ambassador Quilnex asked with the tone of someone who suspected they didn't want to know the answer. The uncomfortable truth. Lieutenant Brooks brightened at the question. Oh, that's when we get creative. Like the time my unit was stationed on Europa and we invented ice diving competitions. You hold your breath and swim under the ice sheets. The record was 15 minutes in sub-zero water. For fun. Vorthak's mandibles were clicking so rapidly they sounded like an old-fashioned typewriter. Best fun you can have with your clothes on, Mitchell confirmed. Though some of the guys preferred the naked version. More of a challenge that way. The silence that followed was pregnant with horrified realization. These weren't just powerful beings, they were powerful beings who actively sought out danger for entertainment. Dr. Grant, noticing the stunned expressions, tried to be reassuring. Don't worry, we'll tone things down for the formal ceremonies. We understand not everyone shares our enthusiasm for extreme activities. What the humans intended as diplomacy, the aliens received as a barely veiled threat. If this was them toning things down, what did their normal behavior look like? Diplomat Zirian's breathing fluid was now cycling rapidly through his suit as he processed this information. Dr. Grant, may I ask, what do you consider to be an extreme activity? Grant thought for a moment. Well, there's base jumping, free solo rock climbing, deep-sea diving with sharks, storm chasing, volcano surfing. He paused, noticing the increasingly panicked expressions. Are you all feeling okay? You look a little pale. Well, paler than usual. As the human delegation continued their enthusiastic explanations of Earth's recreational activities, the alien delegates began to understand a fundamental truth: they weren't dealing with a diplomatic species that happened to be powerful. They were dealing with a species so inherently dangerous that they had to invent increasingly elaborate ways to risk their lives just to feel alive. The cultural exchange was revealing more than anyone had bargained for. The food incident. The diplomatic dinner disaster. The grand dining hall of the Centauri station had been carefully prepared for the first interspecies feast in galactic history. Atmospheric processors hummed quietly, creating perfect environmental zones for each species. Specialized seating accommodated everything from the Floranians' root chair requirements to the Christarca's mineral platform. Chef Roberto Silva wheeled in a cart loaded with what he proudly called Earth's finest culinary exports. His weathered face beamed with the satisfaction of a man who'd spent 30 years perfecting his craft in some of the most hostile environments humanity had colonized. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Ambassador Nick Sterling announced, her diplomatic training evident in every graceful gesture, "Earth is delighted to share our food culture with our new galactic neighbors." Curator Zilthep, a peaceful herbivorous Floranian whose bark-like skin rustled with curiosity, leaned forward on his rude appendages. "We are most eager to experience human nourishment practices. The Floranian Collective has prepared photosynthetic supplements in return." Elder Morpheus, an ancient silicon-based Christarch whose faceted body had weathered millennia, resonated with harmonics that translated as polite interest. The sharing of sustenance is indeed a cornerstone of peaceful relations. What manner of nutrients do humans require? The protein problem. Chef Silva rubbed his hands together enthusiastically. "Well, we're omnivores, so we've brought a little bit of everything. Let's start with some appetizers." He unveiled the first dish with the flourish of a master chef. "This is beef carpaccio, thinly sliced raw cow, served with capers and a light vinaigrette." The silence that followed was deafening. Curator Zilthep's photosynthetic patches began cycling through colors that his species typically displayed only during natural disasters. "Cow," he whispered, his voice crackling like autumn leaves. "You consume other living beings?" "Well, sure," Silva said, completely missing the horror spreading across the alien faces. "Cows are livestock. We raise them specifically for food. Great source of protein and iron." Ambassador Sterling stepped in quickly, her diplomatic instincts sensing trouble. "Of course, we also enjoy many plant-based foods. Chef Silva, perhaps you could show them the vegetarian options?" "Absolutely." Silva beamed, pulling out another dish. "This is our Caesar salad, fresh romaine lettuce, Parmesan cheese, anchovies, and a dressing made with raw egg." Elder Morpheus's ancient form began resonating at frequencies that indicated extreme distress. "You combine the ovum of one species with the flesh of another, for flavor?" The carnivore revelation. The situation deteriorated rapidly as Silva, in his enthusiasm, began explaining the ingredients in more detail. Each revelation seemed to push the alien delegates closer to the edge of panic. "The anchovies are these tiny fish. We catch them in massive nets and preserve them in salt. Really adds a nice umami flavor to the dressing," he explained cheerfully. Curator Zilthep was now displaying the brown and yellow color patterns that indicated his species was preparing for hibernation, a panic response triggered only by imminent extinction events. "And the Parmesan," Silva continued, "that's aged cow's milk that we let bacteria ferment for months until it develops these wonderful crystalline structures. Takes real skill to get the texture right." "You weaponize bacteria," whispered a small delegate from the Harmony Collective, whose entire species had evolved to live in perfect biological balance. "Weaponize? No, we eat the bacteria too. They're part of the flavor profile." Ambassador Sterling was beginning to sweat despite the perfect climate control. "Chef Silva, perhaps we should move on to the main courses?" The main event. What followed would later be described in diplomatic circles as the great culinary horror of Stardate 2387. Silva, interpreting the alien's stunned silence as fascination, began presenting his masterpieces with increasing enthusiasm. "This is our surf and turf, lobster and steak. The lobster we boil alive to preserve freshness, and the steak is from a cow that we aged for 28 days to develop maximum flavor. Elder Morpheus's harmonic resonance was now producing sounds like a crystal formation in an earthquake. You preserve the flesh of deceased beings to enhance their palatability? Oh, this isn't even the good stuff, Silva laughed. Wait until you see what we brought for dessert. Made some chocolate-covered bacon, that's cured pig fat dipped in processed cacao beans. Curator Zilthop had begun making the low moaning sounds that Floranian species produced when witnessing the complete breakdown of natural order. You combine the preserved flesh of land animals with the processed seeds of plants. It's a sweet and salty combination, Ambassador Sterling explained weakly, her diplomatic training completely failing to cover this scenario. Very popular at state fairs. The apex predator truth. The revelation that broke the aliens' collective sanity came when Chef Silva proudly displayed his piece de resistance, a beautifully prepared rack of lamb with mint sauce. Now this, he said with obvious pride, is lamb from sheep we raise specifically for their tender meat. The key is harvesting them at just the right age, around 6 months, when the muscle tissue is perfectly developed but still soft. The dining hall fell silent except for the low harmonics of Elder Morpheus, who was resonating at frequencies that roughly translated to cosmic horror beyond comprehension. A small voice from the Gentlewing Collective finally asked the question they were all thinking, Chef Silva, are there any beings on your planet that you don't consume? Silva paused thoughtfully. Well, we don't eat each other anymore. That's been out of style for centuries. And we generally avoid anything that might be sentient, though there was that phase where people ate octopus. Those things are scary smart. Any more? Curator Zilthop's voice rose to a pitch that was literally painful for several species. Oh, that was way back in our primitive days, Sterling interjected quickly. We're much more civilized now. More civilized, Elder Morpheus repeated slowly, yet you still consume multiple species of beings that you have artificially bred for the purpose of consumption. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds kind of harsh, Silva admitted. But they're delicious. The final revelation. The diplomatic dinner was saved only when Ambassador Sterling managed to change the subject to Earth's agricultural practices. Unfortunately, this led to the aliens discovering that humans had essentially conquered their entire planet's ecosystem, domesticated the useful parts, and eliminated anything that posed a threat. So you've turned your entire world into a food production facility? Asked a delegate from the Peaceful Coexistence Alliance. Not the entire world, Sterling protested. We left some parts wild for recreation and conservation. Recreation, Curator Zilthop repeated numbly. You preserve dangerous wilderness areas, for fun. Chef Silva, completely oblivious to the existential crisis he'd caused, was already planning the next meal. Tomorrow I was thinking of doing a barbecue, nothing fancy, just some ribs, brisket, maybe some grilled vegetables for the herbivores. The sound of multiple species simultaneously requesting emergency evacuation protocols filled the dining hall. Elder Morpheus's final harmonic resonance of the evening roughly translated to, we are not dealing with diplomats. We are sharing a meal with the apex predators of a death world who have somehow developed table manners. Ambassador Sterling smiled diplomatically and made a mental note to request a different chef for the next cultural exchange. The gravity demonstration. The weight of understanding. The conference room aboard the Zentari station had been carefully calibrated to provide artificial gravity at exactly 0.6 Earth standard, a compromise that the Galactic Confederation considered generous to the humans while still being survivable for the more delicate species. What they hadn't counted on was how humans would react to this accommodation. Colonel Diana Hayes stood at the front of the room, her dual doctorate in physics and military engineering evident in the way she approached the gravity controls with both scientific precision and the casual confidence of someone who'd fought in three-dimensional space battles. Behind her, Engineer Blake Turner hefted equipment that looked suspiciously like it belonged in a torture chamber rather than a diplomatic demonstration. Esteemed colleagues, Colonel Hayes began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd survived the lunar gravity wars. "We understand there have been concerns about the station's current gravity settings. Several delegates have mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the current 0.6 standard." Researcher Corinth, a delicate winged skyweaver whose hollow bones and gossamer wings had evolved for life in near-zero gravity, fluttered nervously in her specialized harness. "Colonel Hayes, while we appreciate your consideration, perhaps we could simply discuss theoretical adjustments rather than practical demonstrations?" Archon Nexus, an energy-based luminar whose photonic form could theoretically exist in any gravitational field, pulsed with what his species considered diplomatic anxiety. "The current gravity is indeed substantial. My people require significant energy expenditure to maintain cohesion in these conditions." The casual revelation. Engineer Turner finished assembling what appeared to be a complex measurement device, though several aliens noted it looked remarkably similar to exercise equipment they'd seen in human recreational databases. "The thing is," Hayes explained conversationally, "Earth standard gravity is actually 1 g. What you're experiencing now is significantly less than what we consider normal." The room fell silent except for the soft whirring of life support systems and the gentle flutter of Corintha's wings as she tried to process this information. "Less," she whispered, her voice barely audible through her species' natural harmonic resonance. "This crushing force is less than your normal environment?" "Oh sure," Turner said cheerfully, calibrating his equipment. "Back home, this would feel like we're walking on the moon. Takes some getting used to, actually. Makes you feel kind of floaty." Researcher Corintha's hollow bones began to ache just thinking about it. Her entire species had evolved in the gravity wells of gas giant moons, where the gravitational force was roughly equivalent to a gentle breeze. The current station gravity felt like being pressed between massive stones. "Perhaps," suggested Archon Nexus, his photonic form flickering with increasing instability, "we could simply take your word for this information?" The demonstration begins. Colonel Hayes exchanged a look with Turner that, in retrospect, should have been recognized as a warning by anyone familiar with human expressions. It was the same look shared by people who were about to do something they found amusing and everyone else would find traumatic. "Actually, I think a demonstration would be more effective," Hayes said, moving toward the gravity controls with the purposeful stride of someone approaching a piece of familiar equipment. "We brought some standard Earth equipment to show you how we typically function in our natural environment." Turner opened a case and began removing items that made the assembled aliens question everything they thought they knew about physics and sanity. There were metal bars of various sizes, objects that appeared to be dense spheres, and something that looked like a medieval torture device but was apparently called a weight bench. "These are just basic exercise equipment," Turner explained, hefting what the scanner indicated was a 45-pound metal plate as if it were made of cardboard. "We use these to maintain fitness during space deployments." Corintha's wings stopped fluttering entirely as her brain tried to process the implications. "You voluntarily add additional mass to your bodies, for recreation?" "Fitness," Hayes corrected. "Gotta stay in shape for planetary operations. This is actually pretty light by Earth standards. I usually deadlift about 300 pounds during my regular workout." The mathematical translation of this statement into various alien measurement systems caused several species to experience what could only be described as existential vertigo. The physics horror. Hayes began adjusting the gravity controls with the casual ease of someone tuning a radio. "Let me show you what 1 g actually feels like. Don't worry, we'll work up to it slowly." The station's artificial gravity field hummed to life with increased intensity. As the reading climbed from 0.6 to 0.7, then 0.8, the effects on the alien delegates became increasingly dramatic. Corinth was now pressed so firmly into her harness that her delicate wing membranes were beginning to deform. "Colonel Hayes," she managed to gasp, "this is approaching the limits of our structural integrity." "Really?" Turner looked genuinely surprised as he began performing what he called warm-up exercises, movements that involved lifting his own body weight repeatedly while the increased gravity tried to flatten the more delicate species. We're only at 0.8. This is actually pretty comfortable. Archon Nexus's energy form was beginning to collapse into more concentrated patterns as his photonic matrix struggled to maintain coherence under the increased gravitational stress. How do you function in these conditions? How do your biological systems maintain operation under such crushing force? Crushing? Hayes paused in her adjustment of the controls. This is where it gets interesting. Blake, why don't you show them some basic Earth movements? The impossible made routine. What followed was a display that redefined the aliens' understanding of what was physically possible. Turner began what he casually referred to as light calisthenics, a routine that involved movements that should have been impossible under the current gravitational stress. He performed push-ups, lifting his entire body weight against the crushing gravity. He did jumping jacks, propelling his mass upward against forces that were literally pressing several alien delegates into near unconsciousness. Most horrifying of all, he did it while maintaining a casual conversation. The trick, he explained while performing what humans called burpees, is building up gradually. When you're used to Earth gravity, this feels like swimming through molasses, but you adapt. Researcher Corintha's voice was now barely a whisper. You swim through. What is molasses? Thick syrup, Hayes answered absently while adjusting the gravity to 0.9. Really viscous. Great on pancakes, terrible for swimming. Though humans have tried that too, for fun. The revelation that humans had attempted to swim through thick syrup for recreational purposes was somehow the detail that finally broke several delegates' ability to process new information. The 1G demonstration. When the gravity field finally reached 1.0 Earth standard, the results were immediate and dramatic. Half the alien delegation was now completely immobilized, pressed into their specialized seating with forces that their species considered suitable only for industrial applications or natural disasters. Colonel Hayes stood normally, as if nothing had changed. Engineer Turner continued his exercise routine without missing a beat. They moved with the fluid ease of beings who had evolved under these crushing conditions and considered them normal. This, Hayes announced to the room full of barely conscious aliens, is what we call comfortable. Our athletes train under gravity up to 3 times this intensity. Our military units operate in fields up to 5 times normal Earth gravity when necessary. The mathematical impossibility of this statement caused the station's translation systems to momentarily overload as multiple species simultaneously attempted to express concepts that didn't exist in their languages. Archon Nexus, his energy form now compressed into a barely stable configuration, managed to pulse out a single question: How are you alive? Turner paused mid-jumping jack. Good cardiovascular system, mostly. And calcium supplements. Gotta keep the bones strong. As Hayes slowly reduced the gravity back to the compromise setting, the assembled delegates began to understand a fundamental truth about their new human neighbors: they weren't just visitors from a high-gravity world. They were beings who had evolved to thrive under conditions that most galactic species would consider unsurvivable, and they thought it was normal. The diplomatic implications were staggering. These weren't just tough aliens, they were indestructible aliens who didn't realize they were indestructible.